Hey everybody, Kevin Iole here at AKA in San Jose, and my guest today is the only man in MMA history to defend championships in two different weight classes, the UFC heavyweight champion, Daniel Cormier. DC, how are you?
How you doing, Kevin? It's good to see you in San Jose.
Let's start with this. My intro, I think, is, to me, of all the great accomplishments you had, some people think you're the greatest fighter of all time. You're ranked #1 pound for pound. I think that defending titles in two weight classes is probably your biggest achievement. Would you agree with that?
You know, I think when you think about all that I've done in the sport, and I think about defending titles in both weight classes, I think more about the story, right, of going into Boston after being knocked out, right, and having to really build myself up against a hot guy like Volkan Ozdemir was at the time, and then having to go up to heavyweight and fight the most accomplished heavyweight the UFC ever had, and then to defend that belt on 3 weeks' notice. So the accomplishment is great, but I think about the story that surrounds all that went into doing that, and it really, really does make it special.
Let's get into the story because I think it's interesting. It's not just a little more than 10 years ago you had finished the Olympics, and you really had nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
you're saying, what were you going to do with your life when you walked away from the Olympics? Did you have an idea before Dwayne Zinkin called you?
You know, I had talked to D back in 2001 after I graduated college, and I said, I want to try to make an Olympic team. And before the Olympics, I was in talks with some different universities about becoming an assistant coach with the career path to become the head coach, right? So I was set. I was going to go somewhere, and I was going to make $50,000 a year as an assistant wrestling coach, and then hope one day to make $100,000 as the head coach at a small university and build my way up to coaching a bigger university, just essentially a wrestling coach's path. And then the Olympics happened, and I was just kind of sitting around. I started working at a local TV station in Stillwater, Oklahoma, public access. And I was like, man, this is not for me. I was like, I'm going to go try to do this fighting thing. Mow the wall.
What were you doing on that? Let's go to that. What were you doing on TV?
Well, one is I did this Dancing with the Stars type thing. I also hosted a coaches show where I would interview the college coaches from around the state, high school coaches. And then I had this one called On the Mat with Daniel Cormier and Ethan Kyle. And they got these horrible little videos of us with one camera on the tripod, and we sit there. We even made props. Like we cut out a wrestling mat, painted it up and everything. And then I sold commercial space. Like on the little public access, I would go to these local businesses and go, hey, for $500 for a month, you can have this commercial run as many times. And then I filmed a couple commercials.
And you produced a commercial.
Yeah, like when the people say, okay. There was one where we had this guy had a horse born. Dude had a horse born. And it was like me, like, like it is horse born, I had to come up with these ideas of how to make people more aware of this guy's business. And I was like, man, I don't like getting up in the morning, getting dressed, and going to work. I was like, I need to do something different.
So when you first started MMA, I mean, were you good at it right away? I mean, obviously you had the wrestling ability, but how were you as a fighter?
Bob said the one thing that kind of stood out to him about me was that I was able to hit people. A lot of times when guys come in here and they start fighting, they miss a lot. They just miss and they miss and they miss. And he said, I was finding the target. I didn't know how to punch, but I was finding the target, and I wasn't afraid, So I had that above most people, was that I was willing, but I wouldn't call myself good at it. By no stretch of the imagination was I good at it, but I was more willing than I probably should have been at the time.
The one thing that anybody that goes into a sport where you're getting striked has to deal with is, can they take it? And there's been a lot of great athletes that they get punched in the face and they've had enough and they don't want to do it. What was it like the first time a serious heavyweight hit you in the face? Do you remember what that was like and what went through your mind?
I fought right away, and I will always be grateful to Scott Coker because my first fight was only 3 weeks after I started this thing because I needed to make some money, right? And he put me in there with a kid that was a state champion wrestler, right? So if push came to shove, I would be able to go and out-wrestle this kid. Logic says an Olympian should be able to out-wrestle the state champion high school kid.
Right.
So I beat this kid named Gary, and I felt great, made $10,000, and now I'm on the way. And about a month later, I'm training, and I'm getting cute, Kevin. Like, Bob's telling me, just conventional is where you fight, and good for me, it's better because I wrestled with my left leg in front, so I didn't have to change anything.
Right.
All my shots were still available, but I wanted to be a southpaw, right? Because I thought it looked cool, you know, like I'm trying to move and dip and dodge like Mayweather. Yep. Kick right in the face by Cain Velasquez, broken nose. I got on the plane the next morning, went back to Oklahoma. I was like, I'm out of here for a month, you know, with a broken nose. And I had to really think about, man, is this something that I can really do?
Right.
Because it hurt so bad. I mean, blood went everywhere. Oh my gosh. I turned around, like in the middle of the ring, turned towards Bob and went, oh my God. And he was like, I told you not to fight southpaw because it opens up kicks, you idiot.
Right.
And from that day on, I swear I've never tried to fight southpaw again. But it didn't scare me off. You know, when I got home and I processed everything, I just said I should probably listen more, and that's what I did.
Isn't it strange? I think if anybody says you have any weakness as a fighter now, it's maybe you're vulnerable to kicks, right? To high kicks, and so it's something that
right away. But I mean, that was because I was in southpaw. Like now, if I get kicked, it's because I was making mistakes, you know. And I mean, even as you get to the top of the game, you know, there are going to be mistakes, and ultimately that mistake cost me in that fight against Jones. But to say it's a weakness is, I think it's a little bit. I think it's a little bit much because it's only cost me once.
because they talked about it before.
Yeah, they did before the fight, right? They talked about it before, and then it happened. But because I got Stipe Miocic with that punch, breaking from the clinch, is that going to be a weakness? You know, like, or is he going to fix it? I anticipate he's going to fix it, as I fixed the problem I was having with my high kick defense.
When Cain beat Brock Lesnar to win the title, you were his wrestling coach. That was UFC 121 in Anaheim. Did you ever envision yourself being the heavyweight champion someday as well, succeeding Cain, or did you feel like because you two were buddies, and I know you thought, as I did, I used to always get mocked for how much I liked Cain as a fighter. Did you ever envision yourself winning the title yourself?
I just didn't think anybody was going to be able to beat him, Kevin. I mean, the way he looked when he was healthy and the way he was running through the division, we'd never seen anything like that before. And I'm talking about, I'd watch MMA as a fan when I was wrestling, and I'd never seen anything like it. The cardio, the pace, the pressure, the tightness of all of his technique, his wrestling ability. I was like, who's going to beat this dude? And I was fighting as a heavyweight, but I was in a different organization. So I had no idea that in 2 years Strikeforce would sell.
Right.
You know, it was like, so I didn't really think much about becoming UFC champion. My goal was to become the Strikeforce champion. And then everything else kind of just, like everything else kind of went the way it is. Here's the thing about my career, right? I set these big goals. Like I remember sitting with my wife and we would sit in our little apartment and we'd go, man, imagine, you know, this is when Cain used to do appearances. Some days he'd go for a day and make 30 grand. I'm like, man, imagine if there could be a day that we would ever do this. You know, we would live for it. You know, like how much winning do I have to do in order to get to that point? And then I just said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get us financially secure and be successful in this thing that I do. And I just went to work. And a lot of things had to happen in order for me to be where I'm today.
Did you have to sacrifice in the beginning, like when you first made the commitment to come in, were there things you did without because you were trying to make it?
Kev, you have no idea. Like Selena and I had a young son, right? Our boy was born in 2011, you know, so you're talking me fighting Devin Cole for $15,000, living in San Jose, which at the time I was making $1,300 a month. My rent was $1,300 a month, which today is cheap for San Jose. But I had a $1,500 a month sponsorship from Mike DeSabato at Cage Fighter, and that was all I essentially made. So her and I had like a $175 buffer to try to make it every month. So I would teach wrestling lessons, and then honestly, my wife got on government assistance. You know, when we were first starting out to get our baby his milk and his food. And just for us to eat for a little bit. And then luckily for me, it didn't take long. You know, I was so lucky in the sense that I had people that really cared about me and my journey. Like Selena, and she didn't want to do that. She was a hardworking lady when she met me. She had to leave her job to move to San Jose to be with me. So she sacrificed everything. She up and took a chance on my dream
Right.
to come here and make a family with me and hope that at some point I could make a life force based on my skill. Dwayne Zinkin and Bob Cook, when that sponsorship check was late, they gave it to me in advance, so my rent always got paid. If I ever was down in the dumps and didn't have gas or something, they would give me money to make sure I would make it. That's why today my management has never changed, and it never would, because they were on this journey. We were on this thing together, and just a lot of people took chances to give me a shot, and through hard work, I've actually made it.
How much does having been through that affect the type of man that you are today? Like, you know what it was like to be at the bottom and to struggle. What am I going to eat today? How does that affect the person you are now?
I think you just keep things in perspective, because I was a two-time Olympian and I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything as a two-time Olympian, a world medalist.
And the captain.
And the captain of the Olympic team, and I left wrestling in a way due to my bad habits, not as well as I would have liked to have left my sport. But I understand that for as good as things can be one day, they can be very bad the next, and I not only have me to worry about anymore, I have my wife and my 2 children. So I try to be the type of person that I want my kids to look up to, but also the type of person that people want to employ. Like say, when this dude's done, I want to be in the Daniel Cormier business.
You've had so much adversity and tragedy in your life, your father, your daughter, a lot of stuff that's happened. Would you say, resiliency is maybe your strongest suit?
I believe so. I believe being resilient and just ultra competitive. I mean, I think you have a choice whenever things like that happen, with the tragedy and, not accomplishing the ultimate goals. You can say, this will ruin me, or I'm going to use this to propel me to even greater things. And that's not always easy. It's sometimes you want to give up,
Right.
and I've dealt with adversity not only personally but in competition,
Right.
from being in the NCAA finals with Kel Sanderson and then losing the Olympic bronze medal match up 2-0 in overtime and then giving up 3 points with a minute left in the match,
Right.
to not having an Olympic bronze medal, to not wrestling at the Olympics a second time, to losing to Jones twice. Like, I've had to deal with a lot of things professionally also, but I always try to remind people that for all these failures, I earned the right to fail.
Right.
They didn't say, DC, you're a great guy, you're going to wrestle for an NCAA title. Or, you're a great guy, you're going to wrestle for a world or Olympic medal. I had to earn those things, and through my resilience and my competitiveness, I earned those opportunities to compete against some of the greatest athletes in the sports that I've chosen.
I want to ask you if you regret something. When you were going to fight Jon Jones at UFC 178, you had the press conference in the lobby of the MGM, and the two of you came to blows. Dave Schaller, who was then the PR man, got in the middle of you,
Yeah,
and
he got beat.
he got ragdolled by
Yeah.
the two of you guys. And you ended up throwing a shoe across the lobby of that. And, I think everybody who thinks of Daniel Cormier thinks of classy guy, great guy, and not a guy that would, throw
Yeah.
a shoe in the thing. When you saw that on video, what went through your mind?
I think we all have different personalities, so whereas people say Daniel Cormier is a great guy and he's this and he's that, there's also a different side to me. No one is 100% the same all the time, sometimes I speak and you can hear my Cajun accent come out at times, and it's thicker when I'm around my family, but I think that's just a side of me that is me, though. When I'm angry or if I'm in a situation like that that's volatile, I'm probably going to respond in that way. I mean, I pushed him, and I knew he would fight me, so we fought, and I threw the shoe.
Why did you push him? What was it that made you push him?
Well, when he came up, he came up to me and he put his face on me like that. This is not a guy that I have a good relationship with.
Right.
So to come into contact with him, you're going to get off of me.
Right.
So I don't regret that. I don't regret the action of the shoe. I do regret hitting the lady. That's the only thing.
Right.
I mean, if that thing would have hit Jones, I would not have a problem with it.
Right.
But there is a side to me. I'm not always the same all the time, and I don't think anybody is. I mean, I think we all have different levels to who we are as people.
Right.
And that's just me being totally transparent.
So you're going to fight Stipe Miocic at UFC 241 in Anaheim
Yes.
on August 17th. Rematch of an unbelievable fight. I think it was a short fight, but nobody saw it coming. I think if people thought you were going to win UFC 226 over Stipe, it was going to be by out wrestling him and grappling him. Can you talk a little bit about the way that fight ended? And was that something that you had seen that you could set that short punch up? Was there something you had seen that enabled you to set that up when you watched this film?
You know, when you watch Stipe Miocic, he's a good fighter. I mean, but I don't know why, but there are some habits that he has that are glaring, and they've been there since day one. And that was one of them. And we worked on pulling him into the clinch, getting him close, and then finding a way to find that short shot to just land it. Like, I mean, I've done it to a lot of people.
Right.
But I don't think those people have been cracked by Francis Ngannou,
Right.
and cracked by Alistair Overeem, and cracked by Fabricio. You know, like, I knew that if I could find that punch, I could do some damage. I didn't expect him to go out like that. I got to be honest with you. When he went down, I just went my finishing instincts, you know. It's something that I didn't have early in my career. I wouldn't have known, right? Like, I wouldn't have recognized it as fast. Because the moment he went down, I was over him and I was landing the follow-up
Right.
shots to end the fight. But for as good of a fighter as Stipe is, there are a lot of weaknesses and glaring holes in his game.
Wow.
And I think people don't realize that, and that was one of them. But there are a few other things that allowed me to land on him quite a bit in one round. I mean, we were going tit for tat, and I just think it's a good matchup for me because ultimately he's a wrestler-boxer, and
Right.
I feel like if I'm fighting a wrestler-boxer, I'm going to win.
His size is an issue from the standpoint of range and striking, and you would think that you have to find a way to get inside on him again, but you're not going to probably end the fight this way. Like, that was probably your 1 in a million type shot,
Yeah,
right?
that was, yeah.
And he's going to be ready for that, won't he? So, I mean, you have to sort of approach that. You've been in a lot of rematches. You understand. What's the psychology of a rematch, I guess, is what I'm asking. And you know that he knows. So how does that change things?
I think when I look at rematches, I go, how do you do it better, right? First step is, how do I do it better? When I beat Anthony Johnson the first time, I go, okay, so I submitted him the first time. How do I do it better? How do I beat him in a more impressive way than I did this time? How do I exploit those weaknesses that I found in there earlier? I was able to do that. Against Jones, I was like, how do I improve in the areas that I struggled? Second fight, I did that. And then I got kicked, right? He got better too, in the sense that maybe he recognized those kicks in the first fight.
Right.
And then the second fight, he goes, okay, I'm going to do it. Because he said that before the first fight.
Right.
Right? And it didn't land. Right? So maybe in my mind, I didn't think about it so much, but he still had that in the back of his pocket.
Right.
And the kick landed, he ended up getting the finish. With Miocic, I think, first, how do you do it better? I don't know if I can. Then you think, how do you do it as impressive, but in a different way? Then I start trying to find those areas. You know, I start identifying the places where I think I can exploit him. I mean, I didn't even wrestle him at all last time.
Right.
You know, this was a pure stand-up fight. And in a pure stand-up fight, I was able to go even with a guy that's been lauded as this Golden Gloves level boxing champion. You know, I was able to go even with him. And that gives me a lot of confidence. Do I still respect him? Yes. But there were a number of things in the fight that made me go, okay. Because there's a lot of uncertainty when you go up and fight a heavyweight that's knocked out everybody like
Right.
that. But when he hit me, I felt his power, but not what I thought.
I couldn't find the exact quote that Jon Jones said, but he was talking about going up to fight at heavyweight, and he said, I have 2 daughters to raise, and there's a whole different level of fighting a light heavyweight compared to fighting a heavyweight. That was the gist of what he said. It's not the exact quote. My question to you is, you've done it both recently. What is the difference between, because I always thought, DC, just to add this addendum to it, I always thought that the light heavyweights are more athletic and that they're quicker, so they're maybe more dangerous than the heavyweights. Explain the difference between the 2 divisions.
When I went down from heavyweight initially to 205, I was like, whoa. I was like, everybody's like me, right? Because at heavyweight, I felt like I was just running circles around these dudes. Like, for as good as Josh Barnett was, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm controlling every engagement. Frank Mir. I'm like, I'm controlling every engagement because I felt like they were a little bit slower. And then I went to 205, and I was like, wow. When Anthony Johnson hit me, I was like, I thought I had a second. You know, like I thought I had a second. Even Dan Henderson, you know, who was one of the slower guys I've ever fought, he was able to touch me. I was like, jeez, you know, it's a difference. I truly believe, like, for me personally, heavyweight isn't as hard as light heavyweight. And maybe that's because I lost to Jones twice in that division. But I think those guys are a little slower. They're not as athletic. Their feet don't move as fast, right? And they get tighter. I mean, but that's easier for me because, again, I'm like, what, 14 wins in that weight division. Right. You know, so when people talk about Jones going up, I understand his hesitancy because he's never done it. Right. So when Dana comes to me in Boston and goes, how about you versus Stipe Miocic? And he tells me the money, and I go, sure. Why not, right? I fought Frank Mir, fought Josh Barnett, I fought Bigfoot Silva right after he beat Fader. I was like, okay, sure, it's just another heavyweight. But when you talk about a guy in Jones who's never fought anywhere but 205, I kind of understand why he's more hesitant about it because it's uncertain. Who wants to deal with uncertainty?
Brock Lesnar, he came in the cage after your big moment, shoves you, gets the place going nuts. I know you were happy because you're seeing dollar signs and you being a big pro wrestling fan too, fighting Brock. But do you feel, looking the way it worked out, do you feel Brock used you at all?
Not necessarily, because I think his intention was to fight. But ultimately, he will not hurt himself to just do something. It's ultimately going to always favor Brock, which is great as a businessman. You know, I respect Brock so much for his approach to business, for his approach to the UFC, WWE, the way he plays them against each other. Not many guys have that option. Not many guys have that ability. And Brock does. And I think he does it as well as anyone. So, no, I think I got that great moment. That's something my kids will get to see forever, my grandkids. My son was in there, don't you touch my dad when Brock pushed me. My kid got to yell at Brock Lesnar. You know, like, I got a WrestleMania moment, you know, in the octagon. So I don't fault him for it. I don't get disappointed by it.
And finally, I just want to wrap up. A lot of people were intrigued by your teammate Habib, the lightweight champion. What makes him so good? Like, you've trained with him now 7-8 years. I know you owe him lunch, so
that's a crazy story. That does not sound like me, especially when he was broke. Like, if he was broke back then, I definitely would have paid for his food. I mean, I might pay for his food today, but the guy's got more money than me now. It's crazy. But
what makes him so good?
You know, Kevin, he's got to be the hardest worker. You know, he came in here as a young kid that didn't speak English, and he just watched. Look, when you can't communicate, the one thing you can do is pay attention. And he paid attention. He paid attention to the way Kane trained. He paid attention to the way I trained. He paid attention to the way Thompson trained. Fitch, everybody. He paid attention, and he adopted those habits. And in any room he goes into in the entire world, he's going to be the hardest working guy. Wow. And I think it's his faith. I think it's his commitment to family. I think it's his commitment to team. His commitment to self. Just wrestling ability, confidence. Striking is better than people even think. I mean, I think he's just a great martial artist, and I believe that all of his core values are what propel him to be so special in the way people are drawn to him. I mean, he's a star at a level that nobody ever could have imagined. He's the biggest star we've ever had out of AKA, and it's a testament to all those great qualities that he has. But if you watch him train, regardless of the room, he's always going to be the hardest worker there.
We got 1 and 1A with the two big stars in the sport, Habib, and of course my guest, Daniel Cormier. DC, thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Kevin.